He was said to be Marcion's teacher. He has been called a Gnostic, successor to Simon of Samaria and Menander of Antioch. He has been depicted as a leader of his own school of thought. Some might infer that he was the first Christian to be excommunicated from the Roman Church. He taught, reportedly, in secret, a fact which might explain the varying reports about what he taught. He taught in Rome earlier than the establishment of the institutional church, the papacy, the confessions, and the creeds. His name was Cerdo, a name which literally means gain or profit. Who was he? What did he actually teach? For more information, keep watching. The main sources for Cerdo are Irenaeus, the author of the Refutation of All Heresies, Pseudo-Tertullian, Epiphanius, and Philaster. Justin Martyr, Clement, and Origen do not mention Cerdo, although, assuming they read Irenaeus, they did in fact know him. The earliest and best source for Cerdo remains Irenaeus, about 180 of the Common Era. The Refutator depends on Irenaeus, but invents details about Cerdo's philosophical background and teaching. Pseudo-Tertullian, Epiphanius, and Philaster all depend on a common tradition, which attributes the supposed teaching of Marcion back to Cerdo, such that Cerdo becomes a Docetist, a denier of the fleshly resurrection, a curtailer of Luke, and even a rejecter of the book of Acts and Revelation. Most heresiologists agree that Marcion's thought underwent some kind of development in Rome, a development that took place under the influence of a man named Cerdo. Justin Martyr never mentions Cerdo. He is referred to first by Irenaeus, who tried to connect him to the Simonians, as he did all his opponents. Irenaeus dates Cerdo to the time of Hyginus, which is the late 130s. It is Epiphanius who claims that Cerdo was from Syria and intellectually linked with the Syrian theologian Saturninus. Yet perhaps Epiphanius only inferred Cerdo's homeland because he connected him to Simon and his claimed student Menander, who resided in Antioch of Syria. What was Cerdo's theology or view of God? Irenaeus reports that according to Cerdo, the God having been proclaimed by the law and the prophets is not the Father of Jesus Christ. For the one God is known, but the other God is unknown. The one God is just, but the other one is good. This comment, I believe, can be traced back to a saying of Jesus, according to which he declares that no one knows the Father except the Son. This is in Marcion's Gospel 10, verse 22. If no one knew the Father except Jesus, then the Father is first revealed in Jesus' teaching. This is also a Johannine idea, that no one has ever seen God, but that Jesus as Logos made him known. All who came before Jesus are thieves and brigands. No one saw the Father before they saw Jesus, but when they saw Jesus, they saw the Father. By contrast, the so-called God of the Hebrew Bible seems to have been visible to several of his prophets. Isaiah saw him frontally, and Moses beheld his backside. As to the distinction between a just God of the law and a good father of Jesus, this seems to have been Cerdo's own deduction. He may quite well have been original. We would like to know how he made this deduction. It might have been his own reading of the Hebrew Bible, where the Judean Lord is constantly portrayed as righteous, jealous to protect his own honor, and paying back the sins of people to the extent of punishing their great-grandchildren. In later tradition, Cerdo's teaching is adjusted so that the Judean Lord becomes evil. Yet this was probably a projection of Marcion's theology back onto his supposed teacher, which was an increasingly strong tendency in heresiology. In fact, heresiologists like Pseudo-Tertullian, Epiphanius, and Philaster, perhaps depending on a common tradition, attribute a host of Marcion's teachings back to Cerdo. The author of The Refutation of All Heresies says that Cerdo was influenced by the philosophy of Empedocles, and that he taught, in addition to a good and evil God, a third principle, namely matter. But these data arise from the persistent attempt to portray so-called heretics as philosophers who create schools rather than churches. These later heresiologists are also dealing with later Marcionites who are beginning to vary their teaching. All that we can reliably know about Cerdo's thought comes from Irenaeus. Its basic thrust is that the good, formerly unknown God of Jesus is different from Yahweh or Yahweh, the righteous and well-recognized Lord of Judea. Irenaeus, interestingly, portrays Cerdo as coming back and forth into the fellowship of the incipient Catholic Church network in Rome. Cerdo would, according to Irenaeus, publicly confess that he agreed with the majority views, apparently that the Hebrew God was just. But some people would persistently accuse Cerdo of privately teaching unacceptable things unacceptable to the early Catholic faith, that is. After what may have been several months or years of Cerdo making confession and being accused, Irenaeus says that Cerdo, quote, refrained from the gathering of godly people, unquote. His language is telling. It is not the language of excommunication. The early church had no authority or institutional mechanism for excommunication at this time. Cerdo was never, in fact, banned from attending services of worship in the other Roman house churches or from participating in the early Catholic network more broadly. He simply decided to carry on his own private teaching and worship in Rome, perhaps in his own house church, with no one to stop him. Cerdo is portrayed as Marcion's teacher, to be sure, but Marcion, when he came to Rome, was already a mature man, not looking for instruction. There is nothing implausible, however, about Marcion associating with Cerdo in Rome and learning from him. Irenaeus indicates that what Cerdo taught in secret, Marcion proclaimed openly. There may be some truth to this, and if so, it would indicate that the teaching methods of Cerdo and Marcion were not the same. Cerdo's secret teaching indicates that he designed deeper instruction for higher initiates in his group. It does not indicate that Cerdo led only a school as opposed to a church movement. Churches were also places of instruction, and if Marcion was influenced by Cerdo, they may have belonged to the same house church movement. But ultimately, Marcion's teaching was different from Cerdo's. Marcion set out on his own path. He agreed that there was a distinction between the God of Jesus and the Judean Lord, Yahweh. Yet he came to the conclusion that the Judean lord's justice was only a cover for his evil character. I'm Dr. David Litwa, and I want to thank you for joining me on this very short session on Cerdo. I will include in the next slide some suggestions for further reading. I hope you'll go further. And if you've benefited from this video, I hope you'll also consider supporting me on Patreon or by taking my course on Marcion. The links are in the description. For now, I want to say thank you to all and take care.